Chapter 18, Nationalism, Imperialism, and Resistance, Competition Among Industrial Powers, 1650 to 1914. Again, this carries us right up to World War I, and we have a lot of big keywords here. This is a fully loaded chapter where we'll talk about the increase in nationalism all across Europe. And so we will start with the Ottoman Empire, and we'll look at American nationalism, nationalism and unification in Italy and Germany, and we'll look at the power of the British and new imperialism. So we're starting with nationalism. So Napoleon's message seemed clear after 1810, and that message was this: a nation that was organized for war and had a good administration could reach outside of its borders to fight, conquer, legislate, rule, and even tax. And furthermore, the Industrial Revolution showed the strength of an economically developed nation. So if a nation could have a strong military and a powerful economy, then they would have the power to build a global empire. And we see this especially with Great Britain and their takeover of India. But France and England proved that empires were stronger than nation states. So nationalism in the Ottoman Empire. It's important to remember the Ottoman Empire had its base in what we now know as Turkey or Anatolia, but it was made up of many different ethnic groups. So an increase in nationalism among these many different ethnic groups threatened the power of the Ottomans. And so nationalism really can be good or bad. It can be good in the sense that it unites the people, they can celebrate their cultural accomplishments, or it can be bad. It can force the people to serve the state with national fervor, or could lead the people to want to take over other countries, to spread the power of their nation over others. And there were even instances where, in a fierce competition, sometimes rival empires would encourage nationalism within another empire's colony to cause it to break apart. And this was done to the Ottomans in the 18 and 1900s. And this started in the Balkans in 1815. The Balkan Peninsula, this is where Greece is located. And Greece won its independence from the Ottomans in 1829, ultimately with the help of the British and the French. And there were successful movements in Serbia, Moldavia, and Wallachia, maybe, I'm not sure, that diminished Ottoman power as well. Furthermore, Muhammad Ali acquired Egyptian independence from the Ottomans in 1832. The Saud family achieved autonomy for parts of Arabia. The French took Algeria from the Ottomans in 1830. So the Ottoman Empire was beginning to diminish, and there wasn't much they could do about it. At any rate, Ottoman administration took place through the millet system. And the millet system is where they divided the people into religious groups, pretty much. So some kept close ties with their religious counterparts in other places, which that also served to undermine the Ottomans. For instance, Orthodox Christian people in the Ottoman Empire looked to Russia, where Orthodox Christianity was prominent. Catholics in the Ottoman Empire looked to France. Protestants in the Ottoman Empire looked to Great Britain. And so the Ottomans even came to be called the sick man of Europe by other countries. And between 1839 and 1876, one of their sultans, Abdülmecid I, and his successor created or were forced to create the Tanzimat reforms. The Tanzimat reforms. And so this brought legal code and educational standards up to date with the West. And these reforms were limited and ultimately they were reversed simply because the Sultan didn't want to give up too much power. But it did give way to a group of young reformers called the Young Turks, who were exiled. Ottoman weakness was best revealed in the Crimean War of 1853. The Crimean War of 1853. And in this war, it was basically Russia versus the Ottomans, French, and Great Britain. And initially they were fighting over the rights of Christian minorities in the Holy Land, which was controlled by the Ottomans. The Russians pushing for rights for Orthodox Christians, the French pushing for rights for Catholics. At any rate, France and Britain got involved because they didn't want Russia to gain territory at the expense of the Ottomans. And Russia was beginning to pick apart the Ottoman Empire. Even though the Ottomans were on the winning side here, ultimately their weakness was revealed in the fact that they had to rely on these alliances to win the war with Russia. And so Ottoman weakness, aggressive expansionism, and increasing militarism with more power, with higher power weaponry, would ultimately lead to a large war, which of course would arrive in 1914. So American nationalism. Really a different philosophy of nationalism emerged in the United States. Even foreign observers who came to the U.S. just to observe our institutions, like Alexis de Tocqueville from France, commented on our newness, on our lack of history, and the influx of immigrants from all over the world. And our Constitution even indicated that a nation wasn't necessarily based on people of the same ethnicity, but on common law. And of course, this was challenged by the Civil War in 1865, just 85 years after the nation's establishment. But nationalism never really developed to the extent that it did in other places, especially in Europe. And even though the Civil War was devastating with, 700,000 fatalities, the nation emerged more unified and with industrial and economic expansion that outpaced pretty much every other nation. The new nations of Italy and Germany. So in Europe, of course, nationalism began to grow, but not without consequence. In Austria, Prussia, Russia, France, and Great Britain, the government suppressed national uprisings and saw them as a threat. And so only in the 1850s did nationalism win major victories in some of these places. Before 1870, both Italy and Germany were not united, but divided into many petty states under the control of different rulers. And in Italy, the single largest state was Sardinia Piedmont. But even so, Austria still dominated northern Italy, and the region around Rome was controlled by the Pope. And so this idea for unification in Italy was really the vision of a guy named Giuseppe Mazzini. And Mazzini formed this vision for unification and founded Young Italy in 1831. And Young Italy was a secret association urging Italian unification and independence from foreign control, especially by the French, the Austrians, and the Spanish. And so he joined the political organization of, I'm running out of room to write, Camillo Cavour. It took a lot of people in Italy. Who was Prime Minister of Sardinia Piedmont under King Victor Emmanuel. And Cavour wanted a unified Italy under the control of the King of Sardinia Piedmont, who was Victor Emmanuel. And so he temporarily allied with France under Louis Napoleon to annex Parma, Modena, and Tuscany, which allowed them to join the kingdom in 1860. And then in the same year, military commander Giuseppe Garibaldi led 1,150 red shirts, as his men were called, in the Italian kingdom of the Two Sicilies, which collapsed and joined Piedmont. And so in a series of wars, Italy gained Rome and then Venice, and eventually Italy was unified. A similar thing happened in Germany. Germany was a confederation of about 39 German-speaking states, and the most powerful of these states was Prussia, which began to see itself as the leader of the German-speaking people. And it really only took one guy in Germany. His name was Otto von Bismarck. That's a K. And Otto von Bismarck wanted to unify the German states into a single German nation under Wilhelm I. And so he created in 1828 the Zollverein. Goodness. So one L, I think it's two L's. And the Zollverein was a German customs union that basically allowed free trade with the other German states within the Confederation. Bismarck then increased industrialism, and that provided the financial and military underpinnings for his success, for unification. And then he instituted a policy called Blood and Iron, which eventually led to 3 wars. The first of these wars was the Schleswig-Holstein question, and these were northern German-speaking provinces. Well, they were held by Denmark, but Otto von Bismarck went to war with Denmark to take these 2 provinces and add them to the German Confederation. And then the second war was the Franco-Prussian War, which Otto von Bismarck instigated with France, and France thought, hey, this is the new guy on the block, so we'll show him how it's done. Well, Bismarck defeated him in like 7 weeks and took 2 of their rich French provinces, Alsace and Lorraine, which that would really embitter the French leading up to World War I. And then the Austro-Prussian War was the 3rd war for German unification. And again, Bismarck kind of quickly defeated Austria, which resulted in the southern states of Germany, Bavaria, Baden, and Württemberg, to join the new nation. And Austria was also one of these German states in the Confederation, and really Prussia was just asserting their dominance here. But it did lead to those southern states joining the nation. And then lastly, we have the rise of Zionism. And just briefly, this was popularized by a guy named Theodor Herzl. And this was just the idea that the Jews should have their own national state. Anti-Semitism in Europe was ever increasing. And so he pushed for a Jewish state in their ancestral homeland in Israel. And this will conclude our first video lecture for Chapter 18.